a really fantastic last 6 months, in fact, which started with the election of Jeremy Corbyn as leader of the Labour Party. I never thought I'd see that coming in my lifetime, a left-wing leader of the Labour Party, but that happened on the 12th of September. On that very same day, soon after he became leader of the Labour Party, his first public address was attending the demonstration that we organised to welcome refugees, which was attended by over 100,000 people. Us, along with a range of other organisations, organised that massive show of solidarity, supporting refugees after the picture of baby Island Kurdi had gone viral on mainstream media and social media, and it just unleashed a huge outpouring of sympathy and support and solidarity from the British public and across the globe, in fact, in support of refugees. So I was really pleased, and I really want you to help me have another good 6 months ahead, and I'll tell you what I want. First of all, I'd like Leicester City to win the Premier League. That would be fantastic. Next few 6 months, I'll be celebrating the whole, 6 months ahead, probably for 12 months, and long after that. I'm going to milk that victory for what it's worth. But there's something that we probably all here in this room got a bit more control over. I'd like you to help us build the biggest anti-racist demonstration on Saturday the 19th of March. The last 2 years on UN Anti-Racism Day, we've organised some of the biggest demonstrations against racism for 2 decades, because although we've had lots of demonstrations against fascist organisations, we've not had really many anti-racist organisations which get to, some of the real deep roots of why you actually had groups like the EDL, or why you actually had groups like the BNP, because they latched on to different forms of racism, whether it was Islamophobia, scaremongering about immigrants. It was those issues that they used to gain support. So I really want us to have one of the biggest demonstrations that we've ever had. And the reason why I think we need to have a really big demonstration on UN Anti-Racism Day is firstly because, obviously, as people have all said, we've seen the biggest migration of refugees since the Second World War. But we've seen, instead of a humanitarian approach from our government or other European governments, we've seen fences going up, and we've seen police and border police using tear gas and water cannon, including on child refugees. We've seen children traumatised because of this, harsh treatment, and they don't understand what's going on. They've come from, war-torn countries, as Diane is saying. They've seen, all these horrors and traumas and all sorts of different awful things. Families being raped and murdered and so on and so forth. And then they're fleeing that, and some of them are lucky to survive, because obviously thousands have drowned in the last year in the Mediterranean on their way, having fled persecution at war and so on. Many have drowned, and those lucky to survive are then met with water cannon and tear gas and just abuse by border police or members of the public when they arrive in the EU. And this is a grotesque attack on human rights and our commitment to refugee rights. After the Second World War, the whole world said never again, and we're not learning the lessons of history. We should be welcoming refugees and taking a fair proportion of refugees. Lebanon is the size of Cornwall. It has taken 1.5 million refugees. That is more than the entire EU has taken. So you tell me, what's fair? We talk, we say, oh, we haven't got enough space, and there's we can't take too many. Well, how come? If Lebanon can take 1.5 million, we can take a few thousand refugees in Calais and Dunkirk. The reason why refugees are in Calais and Dunkirk is because they want to come to Britain. The reason why they want to come to Britain is, I'm sure there are numerous reasons, but they include, they've got family members here. And it's a human right for people to be reunited with their families and live and work near and close to their families with that support. Life's difficult if you haven't got loved ones and family around you, so that's a big reason why a lot of them want to come to Britain. You know, David Cameron attacks people for not being able to speak English and not learn English. Well, a lot of the refugees can speak English. You know, they've got English classes. They're teaching English in the schools that Sarah was talking about. So the idea that people, you know, can't speak English and have got no enthusiasm for learning English or integrating into England or Britain is completely false, because we saw, you know, a huge affinity with England and Britain, because you could tell by the schools, by, you know, I thought for some of the funny things were they had like the ABC on this wall in this school, and because I went to Calais as well, and back in January, the day Jeremy Corbyn and Diane Abbott went, and they had, you know, some of the funny things I thought were M is for Manchester United and Mosque. D is for Dubai and David Beckham, and you know, you could just see, you know, there's, you know, anything to do with, you know, English football or English footballers was just like, oh, this is amazing. You know, we're Muslim, we like Islam, but you know, we just love football, and you know, we love England. Q is for the Queen, you know, and things like that. So the idea that, you know, people don't want to integrate or learn English is just scaremongering by politicians. It doesn't bear any resemblance to reality. So I think the numbers argument against taking refugees is a load of rubbish. You know, we have got the biggest migration of refugees since the Second World War. It's our duty as a rich country, the 5th richest country in the world, to do our bit and to take our fair share. The reality is the burden of refugees is actually being taken by some of the world's poorest countries, that neighbour war-torn countries. They are taking millions. The least we can do is take a few thousand in Calais and Dunkirk. It's only 8,000, it's not a lot. So the numbers game is just a load of rubbish. Secondly, the idea, the argument used against taking refugees, another one, is resources. We haven't got the resources, you know, this, that and the other. That's an argument that really winds me up, because we had the resources to bail out the bankers in 2008 to the tune of billions of pounds. We had the resources to do that, and we've got the resources to pay down the debt following the bailout of the bankers. But it's taxpayers, it's working people, and it's the schools, hospitals who are actually taking the burden of that. It's, you know, it wasn't hospitals, it wasn't schools, it wasn't doctors that were responsible for that huge increase in the national debt and the deficit. That was because of the bailout given to the bankers. So this scaremongering about, you know, not enough resources and this whole argument in favour of austerity is just completely wrong. It is a myth. We have got the resources if there is the political will, and if politicians choose to invest in public services and invest in the economy and invest in British people and improve their living standards. We've seen at the moment, because of austerity, the worst attack on living standards of people in this country since the 19th century. I think that's shameful. We have got children whose living standards, you know, are worse and will be worse when they become adults than their parents. You know, I'm certainly a lot worse off than my parents, and I don't think, you know, that is how we should be living today. We should be improving living standards, and it's this scaremongering, this divide and rule argument that the Tories in particular are peddling, which is that, you know, well, we can't take refugees because we haven't got the resources for them. You know, there aren't enough school places, there aren't enough, you know, places in hospital, there aren't enough resources for everyone to go around. It's rubbish. There is enough resources if there is the political will to invest in it. And as I said, you can bail out the bankers, you can invest in public services, you can invest in British people, and you can also invest in humanity and human rights and welcoming refugees. So it's really important that we send a strong message that refugees should be welcome here. And another thing that really winds me up is the way Greece is being treated on this whole refugees question. Well, if resources and the economic situation is a really strong argument for not taking refugees, why are Greece being forced to take 70,000 refugees in the space of months? They get treated badly when it comes to their economic situation. By the way, Greece wrote off Germany's debts after the Second World War. They didn't ask for, you know, huge debt repayments and huge plans and this, that and the other. They just wrote them all off, and they're not getting the same treatment in return, and they're getting forced to deal with 70,000 refugees when their economy is, you know, their dire situation, their economy is well known. We all know what's going on there. And you've got Serbia and Macedonia bordering Greece, which are, you know, erecting fences and preventing them from leaving Greece. You know, we have to share the refugees that are entering the EU. It's not right for any one country to be dealing with the pressure on its own. We have to do our bit. So we have to send a strong message that refugees should be welcome, and we should be taking a fair proportion of refugees, and we've got to say that loudly and clearly on Saturday the 19th of March. But another reason is that I'm sure many people here today can talk about some of the problems with the PREVENT strategy, because it's caused, you know, a lot of problems, I think, for Muslim communities, because obviously there should be a strategy to counter terrorism. I don't think anybody reasonable would be opposed to that, but you have to do something that's effective. You can't have a strategy that stigmatises and treats every single Muslim as a potential terrorist. And what we're seeing is primary school children being treated as potential terrorists. This is not right, you know, and what this is actually doing is affecting school children's learning outcomes, and it's affecting their education. So I'm really pleased, actually, that the government's own terrorism watchdog actually said, you know what, PREVENT is not fit for purpose. It is simply sowing fear and mistrust in the Muslim community, and we need to have a review into PREVENT because it's not working. And he said that to the Home Affairs Select Committee. So, you know, if the government's own terrorism watchdog is saying that, then I think, you know, we can all agree that he's probably got a point, and we need to really rethink the whole strategy to combat terrorism and have something that works with the Muslim community, not treats them all as potential suspects. And then in relation to Islamophobia, PREVENT has been a big issue. We've seen Muslim communities contact us and say what a big issue this is for them, and, you know, one of the reasons why many Muslims will be coming out and joining us on Saturday the 19th of March, but also, you know, the way racist attacks and Islamophobic attacks have increased. It's horrific. You know, we saw a huge spike after the Paris attacks. You know, within hours of the Paris attacks, there were attacks, you know, mainly on Muslim women, which I think is, you know, a real, it's a responsibility of politicians who wind the situation up and who whip up racism against Muslim women that wear the hijab and wear the niqab. I think it's that scaremongering by politicians and all these countries in Europe that have banned the niqab and so on. I think it's that discourse on religious dress which is leading to a rise in attacks on Muslim women that wear the hijab and wear the niqab. I say it's a woman's right to choose what they wear, whether you're wearing hot pants or whether you're wearing a hijab or niqab. You can wear what you want. It's a woman's right to choose. It's nobody else's business. I don't discuss, you know, what men wear. You know, whether you wear a tie, whether you don't wear a tie, whether you button a shirt, whether you don't wear a shirt, whether you wear a t-shirt in winter. So I think it's really important that we stand shoulder to shoulder with Muslim women in particular, who are really coming under attack. The Prime Minister, you know, coming out with a speech saying, oh, you're traditionally submissive, you know, and by the way, we're going to deport you if you don't pass English language tests, when they're cutting English language courses. I mean, it's unbelievable, the hypocrisy. You know, the real issue is they're not bothered whether people speak English. They know most people can speak English. It is just deliberate scaremongering and divide and rule strategies, because since this Tory government's been elected in May 2015, we have seen an unrelenting racist offensive. We have seen speech after speech, policy announcement after policy announcement, legislation after legislation attacking immigration, attacking Muslims, attacking refugees. I can't keep up with it. I mean, I've been doing this, you know, as, you know, full time for a very long time, and I just can't keep up with the amount of things that are coming out. I've never seen anything like it in the last, you know, 9 months or so since May 2015. It's unbelievable, and the reason why they're doing it is because in order to implement austerity, in order to attack British working class people here, they have to have a scapegoat, because they can't say, we're the reason why your living standards are falling. We're the reason why you're hard up and you haven't got enough money in your pocket at the end of the week. So they whip up racism against refugees, against Muslims. Back in the day, it was Irish communities, it was Jewish communities. In the 50s and 60s, it was, you know, Indians like my parents, and Pakistani communities, African Caribbean communities that came over. They were the scapegoats. And today, it's refugees, it's Muslims, it's EU migrants. That's another big one today, isn't it? Because, you know, the big thing about whether or not we should be in the EU is child benefit for EU migrant workers. Oh yeah, that's the real big issue, isn't it? Facing all of us and facing, you know, facing the country today. I mean, how ridiculous is that? I mean, you've got TTIP, you've got, you know, austerity, you know, being implemented across Europe. You've got some really big issues, what's happening to Greece, you know, the euro and so on. Oh, but the big issue, according to David Cameron, is whether or not EU migrant workers should get child benefit. I actually think they should get child benefit. Why? Because they pay the same taxes. They work here, they get the same taxes. Why should they get less benefits? You know, at the end of the day, you know, unless you're going to say, well, you get a tax cut, you're not going to give you benefits, we'll give you a tax cut. It's just actually exploitation to say, to discriminate against a section of the workforce that, you know, pay in exactly the same. You know, we benefit from their taxes going into our public services. So why shouldn't they be allowed to get out of the system just like everyone else does? So that's my view on that. Anyway, I just think it's a deliberate attempt to scaremonger and sow fear and division in order that they can implement austerity. So I think we need to actually stand up against austerity, and we also need to stand up against racism, because it's really important that we stand together and we unite and we rise up against these attempts to divide our communities. So that now more than ever, you know, we must learn lessons of history and say no to racism and say no to Islamophobia, no to anti-Semitism, unite different communities, unite the trade union movement with different faiths, different communities, come together on Saturday 19th of March and say refugees are welcome here. Thank you very much.